We have spent a lot of time talking about exposure. We talked about how to control your exposure using your aperture, using your shutter speed, using your ISO, using neutral density filters. We talked about how to evaluate whether your exposure was good using your light meter, using your histogram, using the playback system on the camera. Why am I so obsessed with controlling exposure? Well, let's explore that. Getting it properly exposed is, of course, a desirable thing, but why does it matter if you use one shutter speed versus another? Well, let's talk explicitly and exclusively about that for a moment. There's a concept called motion blur. So motion blur is when something moves while the camera is taking the picture. So if you use a very, very fast shutter speed, say maybe 1/5000th of a second, and you take a picture of a hummingbird in flight, it freezes that hummingbird, right? You can see every detail. You can see every feather on the wings. It is frozen in time. It's like it's encased in crystal, and you can look at it. If you use a slower shutter speed, you might end up with an image where the hummingbird's body is in focus, but the wings are a shapeless blur. And if you use an even slower shutter speed than that, you might end up with something that's just a blur that's vaguely reminiscent of a hummingbird passing in front of your lens, right? So if you look at this first picture, this is right outside Ivanhall. This is a car driving across the crosswalk. I used a fast shutter speed, 1/200th of a second, and you'll notice it looks like the car is still. You're only taking my word for it that it's moving, right? The car could be parked there. You can't tell from a still picture. Here's the same setup, but I did this with a 1/2 second shutter speed. Look at the difference. Now, the car is streaked. It looks like it's traveling through at light speed, like it's really zooming by. But everything else in this picture remains the same because it wasn't moving. The light posts weren't moving, the shrubs weren't moving, the sidewalk wasn't moving. So everything is still crisp because it wasn't moving except for the car. That motion blur of the car is caught because I used a slow shutter speed. What a different aesthetic that is. And here we go. This is another one at 1/200th of a second. And if you really look at that truck, don't just glance at it, really look at it. Look at the wheels, look at the vertical edges. It's blurry. It's just a little bit blurry. And you might be inclined to say, oh, Tom just didn't get it in focus. Oh, no, it's in focus. Look at the sidewalk. Look at the crosswalk on this side of the truck. It's sharp. Look at that light pole on this side in the Chaminade University. It's sharp. Look at the grass and the shrubs and the trees on the far side of that picture. They're sharp. That picture's in focus. That little bit of blurriness that you're seeing on the white pickup truck is because it was moving. It was going much faster than the 8 miles an hour posted on campus because it blurred. There's motion blur in it at 1/200th of a second. That truck was clipping along. And here again, we have another one at 1/2 of a second, a very slow shutter speed. And you can see that that car just, again, it looks like it's streaming by its speed of light. It's about to travel through time if it were a DeLorean. I don't know how many of you are old enough to catch that reference. Anyway, so there are things that you can do with this artistically. So this is a nice demonstration. This is a picture that a student took for an assignment on shutter speed, on motion blur. And I think this is just beautiful. The way he set this up, you can see that there's a construction sign there. The car should be going nice and slow, but look at how he used the shutter speed to get that motion blur in there. And look at the side of the truck. You can actually see the reflection of the student in the shiny door of the truck because the reflection's not moving, the student's not moving as the truck zooms by. And you can see that the student is actually hand holding. Now this was shot at 1/8 of a second, so that is remarkable to me that you can hand hold a camera still at 1/8 of a second. But look at that, that's beautiful. I mean, the tree, that beautiful tree behind it, the plumeria tree is in focus, it's crisp, there's no motion blur. The little construction sign there with the arrow is in focus. It's a lovely image. It tells a story, right? People should slow down in construction zones. This is the story that this picture is telling us. Here's another one where the shooter used a little bit of a long shutter speed, a slow shutter speed, to mix so that we actually have the student standing here. His name is Rand, by the way. They took a field trip to New York for an advertising competition. He had never seen a subway before, and he was just fascinated by it. So he's videotaping the subway car, the subway coming into the station, and then Cliff, my boss, was taking a picture of him. He used the slow shutter speed deliberately so that since Rand wasn't moving, Rand is crisp, Rand is in focus, but the train has got that element of motion because it's streaking by. This is another example, a kind of more extreme one. The photographer set up on an overlook looking down at a train platform that was very crowded, and lots of people were getting onto and off of trains. The trains are not moving, so they're in focus, right? The tracks are not moving, so they're in focus. The kiosks to either side aren't moving, but the people are in motion. And because this photographer used a slow shutter speed, that motion gets translated as motion blur. And again, this is a stereotypical formula shot, really. That streaking of lights moving through the night city, this is done with a long shutter speed. So the lights, because the cars are moving, get strung through the frame, where the buildings aren't moving, they stay nice and still, they stay in focus. Now, this is exactly the opposite, right? We keep talking about shutter speed to induce motion blur, but you can also use shutter speed to get rid of motion blur. This is another student shot, and this photographer used a very high shutter speed, very fast shutter speed. Look at how that ball is frozen in mid-flight. The player is frozen in mid-jump. The defensive player is frozen in mid-attempt to block. I mean, again, this is just a captured moment, frozen in time. And they did that because they have a high shutter speed, a fast shutter speed. So this, in part, is why I want you to be able to juggle exposures, right? You know that 5/6 at a 60th is the proper exposure for your person sitting in the office, but what you're hoping to get is motion blur. They're typing on the keyboard, and you want their hands to be blurry as if they're just typing away at the speed of artificial intelligence. But you want their face to stay, because they're focused on the screen. Their face isn't moving, but the hands are, right? You need to know how to do that. To do that, you're going to use a slow shutter speed. So you're going to take your shutter speed from a 60th down to a 30th, down to a 15th, maybe down to an 1/8 of a second to get that effect. But you've now overexposed your picture by 3 stops or 4 stops. You're going to have to fix that. So you're going to close down from 5/6 to 8 to 11 to 16, or you're going to take your ISO from 800 to 400 to 200 to 100. You're going to know how to do that, though. You're going to decide what's important to me is the shutter speed, and I know how to bend the ISO and the f-stop to my will so that the shutter speed gives me the effect I want. This is why we're playing with that. In the next video, we're going to explore a parallel concept called depth of field.